And so I know it's up on the screen. And so what we're seeing here is that we have a number of people who will, on their own, say that they have a disability. On their own, meaning not connected to the job market. So it's estimated to be about 1/4 of the U.S. workforce would say that they have some sort of disability or health condition. The however is
Wow.
only 4% when it comes to self-identification in the workplace will say that they have a disability. And so there is a huge disconnect between probably a lot of different areas of safety. Do I feel safe to be able to share that I have a disability? Two, will I worry that there is going to be some unrequested accommodation offered to me because of whatever disability and the perception people have about that? We are up to 93% of companies having some disability centered ERG or affinity group within their organization, but
Wow.
it's only right if it's geared towards 4% of the population that are self-identifying in the workforce, and we have that high of a percentage of ERGs or affinity groups in place. Are we supposed to just believe that those that are going to those are just seeking additional information, don't have a disability, but want to sort of be an ally to those who do?
Mm.
It's hard for us to know. Some of those folks go and probably have something, and they're just unwilling to sort of engage with that. So, I'm going to set the table with that a little bit. There's some other stats that are connected to it, but what do the two of you think or have experienced, I will say, in terms of even on the recruiting or the from a collegiate standpoint, like being together in a workplace? Disability talked about much? Is it avoided?
I mean, I would say
Well,
one of the
yeah.
biggest questions I get from candidate, well, not one of the biggest questions, but it is a question that comes up, is when you're interviewing with a company, like, do you actually disclose whether or not you have a disability? Uh,
Mhm.
right. And like, at what point do you disclose that? So that's a question that comes up quite a bit. And honestly, I mean, I'm a huge fan, obviously, of being transparent. You can't be the realest recruiter without being transparent.
Hmm.
But I a lot of times I'm like, man, defer to I actually have them defer to HR a lot of the time. I'm like, hey, I don't have the answer on that. So I'd be curious to get your take on that, John, on like what the best practice would be.
From an HR standpoint, and I guess I should give like a minute of context, or maybe 15 seconds. Never
Yeah,
mind,
yeah.
not a
Yeah.
full minute.
Less is
I've
more.
been doing HR for a long time.
You have a
I'm a 30.
T-shirt.
I do. I am actually wearing one, and the T-shirt says something about HR has the pizza parlor on speed dial, which is not culture. The You can go to the humoriso.com swag shop for this. But doing HR for 30 plus years, quite honestly, the amount of those who suffer from either permanent or temporary disability, it is something that still think is sort of shrouded. The only
Mm.
temporary disability that often is celebrated, and this is sometimes a surprise to people, is pregnancy. Pregnancy
Pregnancy, yeah.
actually fits, yeah, like it counts as a temporary disability, and rightly so, because there may be some medical things that become pertinent for you while pregnant, but won't stay with you post pregnancy, right? Those that obviously tends to be a bit more celebrated, and people are happy to talk about that. But other types of disabilities often are still shrouded, and I think in the workplace, it's if you can hide it, I think probably the default for most people is to hide it. Like I don't, and this is especially true when you're talking about neurodiverse or mental health related disabilities, because you just don't want to walk in with this sort of label that you put down you suffer from depression or anxiety or ADHD. You just don't want that to be on your quote permanent record.
This is so interesting because as a younger folk coming into the workplace, I wear my neurodiverse badge of honor with honor. And I speak publicly. I mean, I just started a series of videos where I talk about, my neurodiversity and the tips and tricks that I use in my day-to-day life to enhance my brain function.
Yep.
And so I posted the first video about, how I buy myself flowers every week, I can buy myself flowers, uh, guys, I was in an a cappella group in high school. We
Oh
don't need to
my
talk about it,
gosh.
it's
We
Oh,
fine.
need
no,
videos. We need
I am
videos.
all about that. Pitch Perfect. Come on, come on.
If I reveal the name of the group, you will find me on YouTube, so that will come at a time when I feel like you guys have
Producer,
earned
producer,
the
let's
right.
let's do this.
When you
All
feel
right.
safe.
So, as I was saying, I wear it with a badge of honor, and when I apply to jobs, or have in the past, like I say, yeah, I have a disability. I also know that like IBS, for example, is on the list of disabilities, which is like literally crazy, and I definitely have had that. So,
Yeah,
it's funny because the way that I would define disability coming into the workplace is different from maybe what, you know, I I now am arriving to, as a conclusion. So yeah, I think it's interesting how we're defining disability, like, how would we even define that? The other thing is too, is that oh, yeah,
mm,
is also that, a few years ago, this same stat of a quarter of the population saying that they have a disability was 10% saying that they
yes,
have a physical or mental ailment. So, what's interesting to me too is that I think people are becoming more vocal, not just about physical or mental ailments, but they're
Yeah.
also being more vocal about that neurodiverse perspective. So I don't know. I kind of disagree with you, John, on that one. I think more people are feeling like it's more acceptable to talk about that in the workplace and beyond.
I think it's more acceptable to talk about it, but look, it's kind of what we were talking about last week, right? Where we had a candidate that applied to a job, changed his name, and then suddenly started to get
Yeah,
interviews. There's a lot of stuff that seems to be acceptable on even like social media. Like I see a lot of people talking about, mental health or they'll talk about neurodiversity on social media. The problem is when it comes to a hiring manager, what is going on deep down in the hiring manager's mind? And like, are they scrolling through your social media and seeing it, not telling you, and then just
for
being
sure.
like, well, you're not a fit, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
well, why am I not a fit?
yeah.
Yeah, so that can be it can be a challenge to see what's acceptable or becoming more acceptable, particularly on social media versus, like, the actual decisions people make in hiring.
Well,
Mm.
and I'll give two quick things before we move on, Joel, to your headline. But I do want to just say, Danielle, to your point, I think it absolutely is talked about more. I think there is safety in sort of general conversation, but there is no roll call happening. So if I go to an ERG regarding disability, they're not cross-referencing my self-identification information. So I still, on my permanent record, may not say I have a disability, but I may go
Mm.
to affinity groups that may help to support me. And
Right.
the last thing I'll say is hiring is down 8% specifically for those who identify as having a disability in the last 2 years. So something still is happening there.
Well, there
I
was
can't
a
say
boom because
exactly.
of COVID.
True, true,
And now there's less of a boom because we're returning to office and it's a lot less flexible overall on the whole. So I think
true.
that also is a contributor that we have to consider.
Certainly could be. That's true. Joel, let me move over to you and your celebration.
Well, I'm still celebrating, because it was, recently National Intern Day, and,
Slay.
what's funny? I think, I saw a lot of companies talking about that this year, like internships in general, and then I made a thread. Is that what we're calling threads? I made a
Yes.
thread and I said, "You want to celebrate interns? Here's a really good way. You just pay them like everybody else." That's how I like to celebrate work that's done is to pay people. But it's funny. I actually took a unpaid internship. I don't know. It was 2010. I took an
Joel, how
unpaid
could you?
it's before you could say stuff. Like, it's before anybody was saying
Before it was
anything on
illegal.
social media. It was just
Yeah,
nobody was saying anything. So, I took an unpaid internship for about 2 months, and I
So did
I
I.
gained a lot of value. I gained nothing, and I didn't get paid, so I quit. And then
Me too.
my second internship was actually paid, and it was a sales internship, and it was actually a great experience. So I'm always telling young people, like, getting an internship, I still think has tons of value. But these unpaid internships, any companies out there listening that have unpaid internships, I can't believe that's still a thing nowadays. So I love your take on this, Danielle. Like, are we still seeing this? Is this like a thing?
Yeah, it's definitely a thing, and it's something that we will talk about in the next headline as well. But I think on the whole, unpaid internships are unethical. If you're getting credit, however, for school, I think that that's fine. It's not ideal, and I think that unpaid internships are inequitable, because not everyone can afford to have an unpaid internship. Most people actually can't. So by doing that, you're actually raising the bar for a lot of people for that point of entry. And the second thing I would say about just paying people for their time is a show of respect. It means, hey, I respect your time. I respect you being here. I respect the value you bring to this team. And therefore, even if, to Adam's point in the comments, even if there is a minimum, which should be minimum wage at the very least, I think that that is sufficient. But paying someone nothing for their time, I mean, I have been a part of companies that have done that. I was actually part of a company that had parents pay for a career program to have their kids work for the company that was giving them that career program as their unpaid internship, like, to get experience on their resume. Like, it was so Ponzi scheme like, and that was so unethical, and it led to a toxic work environment, surprise, surprise. So I think that unpaid internships and the people that kind of have an idea to not pay interns, it's a red flag for me personally.
John, what are your thoughts here? Did you and did you do an internship? Tell me about your
Um,
internship.
no, no, they didn't do internships there. We it was too much effort and energy to carry the hammer and chisel and stone tablet, so we weren't into those internships at that point. But I would say I never did an internship. Um, look, let me say a couple of quick things. One, internships are legal. Unpaid internships are legal. There's a very, very specific definition of that internship in the law. By definition, an internship should cost the company. That's the basic premise. And what that means is in teaching, you are taking someone away from their production in order to invest in the future of another. That's what the law looks for. And so if I am taking time from my staff to teach someone how to do something, to allow them to shadow the work and take time as I'm doing it to explain along the way, that is a performance cost, a
Yeah.
productivity cost. And so that's where the law says unpaid is allowed. There are some city and state changes to that, but federally that's allowed. But totally agreeing with Danielle, I don't think most companies do it well. I think most companies show an intern how to do something and say, oh, okay, now do it for the next month. Once you
Hmm.
slip into operational advancement, there's something the intern is doing that helps the company perform in the normal way it would perform. You have to pay that intern. There's actually no argument. You have to pay the intern. That's where, if you remember the Black Swan movie case from some years back, that's what was brought to light. And the first time through the courts, those unpaid interns won because they
Mm,
were proved to show that they were doing the same thing as production assistants, no difference.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful about that. So I do agree. You got to really know the definition and whether you're really meeting it or not.
I
love
love it,
But
it.
guys.
I feel badly because I feel like we pick on Gen Z with some of this, and I don't really like that because I'm first of all I'm not a generations person. Not that I don't believe they exist, but I know there's always some Gen Z stuff, Danielle, that you have. And what do you have for us this morning?
Yeah, so I mean, just like any generation coming into the workplace, we
I
have a
mean,
bunch of old people telling us what we should and shouldn't
what in the
do.
world?
So, basically, this week we kind of talked about it a little bit in the last week. But the Gen Z job seekers should be willing to do anything, says Squarespace CMO, who cold called from book for her first role. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
basically this
It's
same
a book with
person,
phone numbers, just
Yes,
like,
it's
what's a
I
phone
like,
book? I've never even seen
oh,
that word before.
oh,
the yellow book, I think, is that what,
No,
or
Cardi,
blue?
I'm
yes,
Was it
kidding, I'm
blue or
kidding.
yellow?
yes,
I grew up in a
yellow.
millennial dominant household, so I know what a phone book is.
Alright, good.
Um, but anyway, yeah, so some questions for me came up, as a Gen Zer, and I was kind of just thinking, like, how the same person making this claim would react to me telling them that you should work for free in this economy. So that was my first thought. And my second thought was, even with experience, which you shouldn't need to get an entry level job, right? Because it's entry level. I know that a lot of Gen Zers coming out of school are struggling to find jobs. So, like,
Mm,
what exactly would they get out of working for free or or doing whatever for anyone? Um, and I think it goes back to like the unpaid internships discussion as well.
mhm,
But also, this same article brings up the whole paying your dues argument, right? Of, well, you should be willing to do anything. My thing is, just because the CEO or CMO in this case worked their way up from the mailroom 30 years ago doesn't mean that the same systems work today, right? We need to continue to reconsider and reevaluate the systems of work based on today and what's best for us now with the current tools we have, not decades or centuries ago. And we'll talk more about the differences in our later segment, of now versus then, but they include the fact that today we have a much more educated, globalized, technology enabled, job structures are different, that kind of workforce, to name just a few of the differences. So curious to hear what both of you think, starting with Joel, my
Oh!
millennial my
Uh,
millennial friend.
I was gonna let John go then, but, yeah, no, I think, what's interesting is when I actually
nobody
landed
nobody wants to hear from me. You better
Mm,
go.
when,
at least you know
so
your place.
the second internship that I landed that was paid, I will actually say what I did is I actually connected with, and this was back in 2011, all right? Yeah, it was 2011. I connected with every single recruiter at the company, on LinkedIn. And what I did is I actually applied and then I DM'd every single one of them and said, "Hey, did you get my application?" And it was for a sales position, and I got a call back in 10 minutes. And this was an internship locally to me that gets like thousands of applicants. So I actually see I think the point, to be fair, on the CMO that she's making was like, "Hey, in this job market, it's competitive. Hitting it easy apply and just applying to jobs might not be enough. Like, you maybe have to take an extra step," which I think that's the point she was making. I feel a little bit
Mm,
unfortunate that
Mhm.
she's not aware that, like, if you say something and you're an executive, you are gonna get absolutely ripped on social media. So I think that
for
part of the
sure.
job search, like, I actually kind of agree. Like, I think, like, it's not just Gen Z or interns, it is everybody. It is competitive out there right now, and you kinda have to do a little bit more to stand out. It's just the nature of it. But then as far as, like, just doing anything and be willing to do anything, I mean, that's where it kind of falls apart for me. It's like, look, we're still dealing with like humans, and it's like, what does that say about your company? Like, what are these interns at Squarespace doing?
Right.
Like, are
Right.
they are they like just go get me 80 coffees? Like, are they just treated like, I don't know what the right word is, but that's where it falls apart. So, like, I think what she
Yeah.
meant was like, hey, maybe you have to work hard, and like I worked hard, but I just think this is why, if you're an executive, you got to be careful with like what you communicate and how you communicate, because this article has gone viral and these comments
Yeah.
have gone viral, and so you got
And
to think
yeah.
about what are you actually saying here.
And just to add on to that too, it really is about the delivery from a perspective of a Gen Zer, right? You're listening to some CMO who's getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars a year to run a company, who, you have no connection to them, and they're basically prescribing you on what you should be doing in an economy that they've never experienced before. So I feel like also the phrasing and the framing of in which she's kind of delivering this, of like, this is what you should be doing, should imply shame. And maybe that's just the article, but also,
Wow.
yeah, like willing to do
Wow.
anything. I mean, it's just, well, why are you telling me
Sh-
Anything.
sh-
what I should be doing?
should implies shame. I've never heard that before.
Brene
Should
Brown,
implies shame.
we love her.
Yeah, I don't know that I've read that before. Should imply shame. Well, yeah,
It's
we
like when
need to
your
move
parents
on.
tell you you should move, you
Y-
should clean
y-
your room. It's like,
yeah,
well,
I don't.
why do I care what you think, you know?
Because I pay for the mortgage, you
You're
ungrateful
never
bum.
talking to my
Like,
6-year-old, okay?
yeah, right. Like, we are off the rails with that. I can't get behind that. I'm so sorry to say. Um, I'm so
Uh,
sorry to say. I know we need to move on. I'll just comment quickly to say, Devil Wears Prada, one of the most watched movies in the world. Everyone feels some sort of way about Anne Hathaway starting by grabbing coffee from Miranda and working her way up. Why do we romanticize that and idealize it if we're going to have a personal issue with it? Not sure. Not sure.